So a few days ago, Justin Herbert, the quarterback for the Oregon Ducks, announced that he will be returning for his senior season at the University of Oregon instead of declaring for the 2019 NFL Draft. And this was not news that NFL GMs and NFL scouts wanted to hear, especially for teams that were looking for a quarterback in this year's draft. Because this year, the quarterback draft class, it's not as stacked and it's not as deep as it has been in years past. But Justin Herbert, he was the best one out of all of the quarterbacks. In fact, he was rated the #1 quarterback according to a lot of experts and to a lot of scouts and even probably GMs. And the question is, are there NFL GMs and scouts that are now scrambling to find the next best guy? And who I think the next best guy is, there are 3 quarterbacks that kind of stick out as who could be the next best guy, and that's Dwayne Haskins for Ohio State, which he's the focal point of this video, Daniel Jones for Duke, and Drew Lock from Missouri. Those are the 3 quarterbacks that will probably be the first 3 quarterbacks taken in the April NFL Draft. Now, Drew Lock has yet to declare, Daniel Jones has yet to declare, and Dwayne Haskins has yet to declare. But I think Dwayne Haskins will end up declaring. He still has to compete in the Rose Bowl, and I think it's a 95% possibility that Dwayne Haskins will declare for the NFL Draft a couple days after the Rose Bowl, especially if he ends up dominating that game. If he has something like maybe 350 yards and like 4 or 5 touchdown passes, then he'll definitely declare for the draft, because at that point, what else does Dwayne Haskins want to prove unless he wants to win a national championship? But I think if Urban Meyer would not have announced his retirement, I think Dwayne Haskins would probably stay. But since he is stepping down after the Rose Bowl, I think Dwayne Haskins, he declares the NFL Draft. Especially if he dominates the Rose Bowl, like I just said. He's going up against a Washington team that is a pretty solid team in college football. I mean, their worst season out of the last 3 previous seasons, but still, Washington had a pretty good season. They struggled a bit, but Washington is not a team to take lightly. So if he dominates the Rose Bowl, then I think there's a 95% chance that Dwayne Haskins declares the NFL Draft. But if he does horrible, maybe he might consider staying because he doesn't want to be remembered that way. But I'm leaning towards either way that Dwayne Haskins will declare for the draft, because now that Justin Herbert is out of the equation, Dwayne Haskins turns out to be the next best guy. And what I've kind of wanted to make this video about is this a battle for Dwayne Haskins? Is there a bunch of NFL teams that are fighting for Dwayne Haskins? It's kind of a battle for him right now. And there's still plenty of time to settle the battle from now and until draft night in late April. But I think there's at least 7 or 8 teams that it would at least behoove them to take a quarterback in the NFL Draft in the first round in April. So what I've done is I've done about 7 or 8 teams that would find a quarterback like Dwayne Haskins useful. It doesn't really have to be Dwayne Haskins, but if there is time, maybe I could consider doing a quarterback frenzy prediction video, because I'm sure there's going to be a frenzy at the quarterback position. Just because I list off these teams doesn't mean they're going to draft a quarterback. It's just maybe they feel like they might need a quarterback, or they might look towards a quarterback. But we will see what happens from now and until April, because a lot of things can change. Like, for example, someone could trade a quarterback to one of the quarterback needy teams. So this is just a list of teams that are kind of quarterback needy. So the first one, let's have an obvious one. The Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are probably going to look for a quarterback in the 2019 NFL Draft. But the question is, were they gung-ho about Justin Herbert the whole time? Because what I've been reading and what I've been hearing is that John Elway was very surprised, the Broncos GM. Very surprised that Justin Herbert announced that he was going to return to Oregon for his senior season. So it makes me think that the Broncos were going to draft Justin Herbert. Even if they weren't high enough to get Justin Herbert, they probably would have traded up to get him. So I think Justin Herbert was a hot commodity for a lot of these NFL teams, probably even the Broncos as well. I think the agenda for John Elway was to do 2 things. One, find an offensive-minded head coach, because I think that Vance Joseph will by the time this video kind of really gets up there in views, like, I think that Vance Joseph will no longer be the Broncos coach. So that's also a possibility. I also think that the second thing on the to-do list was to get a quarterback. And I think he favored Justin Herbert out of any other quarterback. So the question is, will the Broncos settle for the next best thing in someone like Dwayne Haskins, or are they just going to go rogue and just draft somebody out of the ordinary in a later round like Will Grier or Ryan Finley? Are they going to go rogue and wait till round 2 or 3? Or are they just going to give Case Keenum one more year, then maybe trade him in the offseason next year for maybe like a 7th round pick or something like that, and just settle for Justin Herbert next season? Because it's going to be telling on what happens with the Broncos in the NFL draft. And the draft isn't until April, but I can tell you right now, the Broncos will be a team to watch, because will they want to take a quarterback that's in this draft class pool that's not as deep and not as stacked as it has been in years before? So that's going to be interesting to keep an eye out for the Broncos. Were they gung-ho about Justin Herbert this whole time, or are they willing to settle for someone like Dwayne Haskins, Drew Lock, or Daniel Jones? Because those are the 3 quarterbacks that will stick out from now and until April as first-rounders. There could be 4 quarterbacks that go in the first round. At least I think there might be. But I'd say the 3 that will stick out are Haskins, Jones, and Lock. So the next one, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this one's kind of obvious. Yes, the Jaguars made the AFC Championship game last season, but that was an outlier season for the Jaguars. Blake Bortles had some good games last year, but ultimately, there's more bad to Blake Bortles than there is good. And I think they want to move on from Blake Bortles. I'm surprised they didn't trade Blake Bortles in the offseason for maybe something while he had that good season, while he had that outlier season to look back on. I'm surprised the Jaguars didn't want to draft a quarterback in that first round. I'm surprised that didn't happen. But I think the Jaguars, they don't make the mistake this season either. I think they'll go with a quarterback. I think they're in the race for Dwayne Haskins. Another team I think that's in the race for him, the Miami Dolphins. So those are the 3 teams, the Broncos, Jaguars, and Dolphins, to keep an eye out on. I think those are the 3 teams that are ultimately going to be the front runners to win the battle for Dwayne Haskins. And the Dolphins, I think they're looking for a quarterback because there are reports on Bleacher Report that Ryan Tannehill will not be coming back to the Dolphins in 2019. So that is an indicator that they might want to be in the hunt for Dwayne Haskins. And someone like Dwayne Haskins, I think that could be useful in the Dolphin system, especially with Adam Gase as the head coach. I feel like if he's in assist with Adam Gase, I think he can be successful. Especially with Tom Brady getting up there in age. We don't know how long Tom Brady will play for. It's going to be interesting to see if Dwayne Haskins falls to somewhere like the Dolphins. Next team I think is in the race for him, I think it's the Washington Redskins. And the reason why I think it's the Washington Redskins is because the Redskins traded for Alex Smith in the offseason last season, but it turns out that Alex Smith had an injury. Well, he suffered an injury against the Texans. 33 years to the day since Joe Theismann's injury. And it looked very similar to Joe Theismann's injury. And if it's looking similar to that, then the chances of Alex Smith taking another snap in the NFL is less than 1%. And I think the Redskins, they need to find a different quarterback because they got to start fresh, in my opinion, if Alex Smith cannot play another snap in the NFL, because Colt McCoy didn't really do much. Mark Sanchez didn't do much. And they were down to Josh Johnson, someone who didn't take a snap in the NFL ever since, I think it was 2013, leading up into the season, or like it was 2015. But still, someone that didn't take a snap in the NFL for that long is who they were down to at quarterback. That's who they're down to right now because this is being recorded before the Week 17 games. So the Redskins, they got to move on. They need another quarterback, especially if Alex Smith can't take another snap in the NFL. And it's unfortunate, but if your injury is very similar to Joe Theismann's injury that was 33 years ago, then the odds of you taking a snap again in the NFL, less than 1%. So the next team that I think is in the race for Dwayne Haskins is the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's kind of simple. I mean, Andy Dalton hasn't delivered for the Bengals. And yes, some may say it's because of Marvin Lewis, and Marvin Lewis isn't really that good of a coach. But still, Andy Dalton's been to the playoffs multiple times, and he still can't come up with a playoff win. In fact, what have the Bengals done for the team? What has Andy Dalton done for the Bengals lately? He hasn't done anything. He hasn't even gotten to the playoffs. Ever since that game where they could have beaten the Steelers, but Vontaze Burfict decided to be an idiot. It's just, ever since Vontaze Burfict and Adam Jones, they ruined that playoff win for the Bengals. They ruined that for him. And ever since that, I think that's the moment the Bengals franchise, they need to consider moving on because they haven't done anything since that moment. And when you have a top 5 wide receiver in the league like A.J. Green, at least statistically, maybe even figuratively as well, you can argue that and say A.J. Green's top 5, but definite top 10 receiver in the league in A.J. Green. I think it's time to move on from Andy Dalton because I think the Bengals, they don't really have the equipment. They're not equipped to win a Super Bowl right now with Andy Dalton. I think they got to move on. Next team, kind of the same thing, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jameis Winston. With Ryan Fitzpatrick most likely retiring at the end of the season, he's getting up there in age. And Jameis Winston, things just haven't worked out for Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston hasn't been to the playoffs yet. And when you draft somebody for the number 1 pick, the number 1 overall, like what the Buccaneers did with Jameis Winston, you are expected to perform. You are held to a high standard when you are drafted number 1 overall. There is high expectations for you. And Jameis Winston has not even met the expectations. He's not even close to meeting the expectations. 0 playoff appearances for Jameis Winston. Only 1 season with a winning record. 9-7. And that was back in, I think it was 2015 or 2016. So only 1 winning season for the Buccaneers under Jameis Winston. And the next season, a lot of people thought, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people thought that the Buccaneers, they could be that next team to break through because we saw the Panthers break through and go to the Super Bowl. We've seen the Atlanta Falcons break through and go to a Super Bowl. A lot of people thought the Buccaneers could be that next team to have a good season and end up appearing in a Super Bowl. And they went out and got all these weapons for Jameis Winston. And he still couldn't perform. I mean, argue that he was injured a lot he was injured consistently last season, and this season he's gotten into trouble, grabbed the Uber driver, and then he was benched at least twice this season. I think he was benched. He's been benched multiple times this year. I mean, even a Tampa Bay author or some newspaper editor or something, or just whoever, someone in Tampa Bay, someone for the Tampa Bay Chronicle, I think there is a thing that they want see the Buccaneers move on from Jameis Winston. They think it's that time. And I think it's time too. I feel like Jameis Winston, I think it's almost over for Jameis Winston. It wouldn't surprise me if Dwayne Haskins fell in the draft at least to the Buccaneers position. And if they didn't take a shot, especially by then if Ryan Fitzpatrick announces retirement from the NFL. And Jameis Winston has never met expectations. He hasn't met the expectations that you expect. Now look at the quarterbacks that have been... let's name some quarterbacks who were drafted number 1 overall. Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Cam Newton. Those are 3 that come to mind. And what have all of them done? Peyton Manning has won 2 Super Bowls. Cam Newton has been in a Super Bowl and won an MVP. Andrew Luck has been in the playoffs multiple times. He's been to the AFC Championship game. So those 3 quarterbacks in particular, those are ones that stick out. And Jared Goff was also drafted number 1 overall, but I don't want to include Jared Goff in this because Jared Goff has only had 1 full season in the NFL as of this moment. And he was not brought in till later in the season by the Rams under Jeff Fisher. And Jared Goff, he had a pretty solid season last year. He's doing pretty decent this season, although lately it's been a little bit of a disappointment. But I think there's still room to improve. So those 4 in particular. Jared Goff, he went to the playoffs in his first full season as an NFL starting quarterback. Now, argue he may have had Sean McVay, an offensive genius. But that's besides the point. At least Jared Goff has been there. Now the question is, will the Buccaneers want to move on from Jameis Winston? Or are they going to spare Jameis Winston one more opportunity? Are they going to give him one more chance? This is the last chance. I guarantee that Jameis Winston will not be on the Buccaneers by the year 2021. I guarantee that. Now, whether or not they are going to part ways with Dirk Cutter on Black Monday, that's besides the point. But they're kind of a team that at least could be considered going for quarterback. Maybe not necessarily Dwayne Haskins, but just a quarterback in general. Because right now, Jameis Winston has not met expectations. I mean, if you were to tell me, like, who would I compare Jameis Winston to? I would say I compare him to a Jamarcus Russell with talent and potential, and a Sam Bradford that's not injury prone. That's who Jameis Winston is to me, is a Jamarcus Russell with talent and potential, and Sam Bradford that's not injury prone. So, like I said, I guarantee that Jameis Winston will be the Buccaneers quarterback by the year 2021. I guarantee he'll either be somewhere else or out of the league. Because he's had some problems, especially with, he's been suspended this season. He's been benched multiple times this season. I think it's just a mess in Tampa Bay. Now, whether or not they give him one more chance and they try to get a new head coach, someone that's offensive-minded to try to change Jameis Winston's career around, we'll see what happens. So they're kind of in the race for that. Next team that I would consider in the race for Dwayne Haskins would be the Oakland Raiders. And John Gruden, and this one's simple, because John Gruden is trading players that had talent on the Raiders away. He's traded Khalil Mack. He's traded Amari Cooper. He was open to trading Carl Joe, so he put him on the trade block. He might be open to trading Derek Carr. He could be open to it. So the question is, does he want to make the move on another quarterback? I think Derek Carr, I think he's going to get spared one more season. I think they're at least going to give Derek Carr one more chance. Maybe at least wait until his contract is up, even though it's going to be a while. Would someone with Derek Carr's contract, would he be someone that'd be willing to take someone like Derek Carr? As like I said, maybe there's going to be a quarterback frenzy. I think this might be a big quarterback frenzy in the offseason. I think there's so many quarterbacks going to be moving places. So if the Raiders were to trade Derek Carr away to someone like maybe someone that was needing a quarterback like the Dolphins or maybe the Redskins, it's almost a catch-22 because when you draft a quarterback, you don't really know what they're going to do, but you just expect high expectations for them. And that's really what it comes down to is, does John Gruden, does he want to rebuild everything? But the way he did he traded Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper away in the same season, I think it's showing that maybe John Gruden wants to start fresh. And that could be the only reason why Derek Carr would even be on a trade block anytime soon, is because he wants to start fresh. But I think with someone talented like Derek Carr, I think you have to keep him on the Raiders. But I think they might still be in the hunt for a quarterback in the draft because you don't really know what John Gruden's up to. And the next team that I think is in the hunt for a quarterback like Dwayne Haskins, this could end up being the favorite to land Dwayne Haskins, depending on how you look at it, the New York Giants. Now, I think the New York Giants, I think they need to draft a quarterback. Some thought that they should have done it last year where they ultimately wanted Saquon Barkley. And I think that move is working out because once you add in, let's look at the Giants long term. You have Saquon Barkley, a franchise running back. And you have Odell Beckham, may have an ego, but he's still a talented wide receiver. So those two players, you are set on those. And you just need a quarterback. Now, I think it behooves the Giants to draft Dwayne Haskins this season. I think it behooves them, and you give them an opportunity to line up behind Eli Manning. Learn from him for about a season or two, maybe about a season, maybe even a second season, and then give him the green light the next season. So the question is, would Dwayne Haskins be a day one starter if the Giants drafted him? Because do the Giants keep Eli Manning for one more season? Because does Eli Manning know that his time is almost up? Is that what it's about? Because Eli Manning, I think, only has about one or two more seasons in him, if we really want to look at things. That's what I think. Only one or two more seasons is what Eli Manning has in him. And if you draft Dwayne Haskins, who I think is the best quarterback in this draft class, I think he's got the best arm. I think he's the best passer out of all the quarterbacks in this draft class. I think he's the best quarterback. You give him an opportunity to learn. You give him a chance to study your playbook. you draft Dwayne Haskins, let him learn under Eli Manning for a season, and then cut him loose in 2020 and see what he can do. I think that's a possibility. Although, it's kind of interesting, though, because the Giants head coach is Pat Shurmur. And someone who might sign a free agency contract with the Giants could be Vanderbilt quarterback Kyle Shurmur. So that could be very interesting. But I think the Giants, they might want to go with Dwayne Haskins. I feel like maybe it could come down to a conflict of interest if the Giants end up drafting someone like Kyle Shurmur in like the 6th or 7th round, sneak him in as a backup or practice squad member. I feel like that could be very interesting. Although I think the Giants, even though maybe Pat Shurmur wants to coach his son Kyle Shurmur in the NFL, I think the Giants, I think they are the favorite to land Dwayne Haskins right now. Because I think the Giants, they have the best resources, possibly, of maybe trading for a number 1 pick. I feel like John Elway doesn't want to do it because I feel like this draft class is going to be very defensive heavy. And maybe the Giants, they might want to move up a couple of spots. They could have the resources to do that if they wanted to. But we'll see what happens. So that was just kind of a this is technically kind of a mock draft, but it's not really a mock draft. It's kind of just analysis. Because now that Justin Herbert is out of the equation, it just comes out to who's the next best guy. And I think the next best guy is Dwayne Haskins. And right now, I think this could be a battle for Ohio State quarterback Dwayne Haskins. And by the time that maybe a lot of you watch this video, it may already be confirmed that Dwayne Haskins is declared for the NFL draft. I think there's at least a 95% chance that Dwayne Haskins declares for the NFL draft days after the Rose Bowl. In fact, especially if Dwayne Haskins dominates the Rose Bowl, like I said towards the beginning, if he dominates that Rose Bowl against Washington, I think he declares the NFL draft. Because what all does Dwayne Haskins want to prove? Unless he wants to win a national championship with the Buckeyes, I think Dwayne Haskins goes to the NFL. Because I think this is tempting enough for Dwayne Haskins to try to be the number 1 quarterback selected in the NFL draft. So comment your thoughts down below. Comment who you think would land Dwayne Haskins if he declared for the NFL draft at this point. Also comment below, who do you think is the best quarterback in this draft class? And who's a underrated quarterback in this draft class? Anyway, like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderful one.